I sat up, gasping, the cheap floral duvet pooling around my waist. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen displayed a name I had not seen in a decade. Ethan. I knew that name. I knew that text. It was the text that had set everything in motion. I picked it up, my fingers trembling as I swiped to open it. Ethan hey babe. I'm at the Ritz Carlton with the investors. They're impressed. But there's a situation. Come now. It's about Mia. A laugh, hollow and jagged, tore from my throat. Mia. His precious little Mia. The fake heiress he would choose over me in just a few hours. I looked at the date on the phone. August 8th. The day my world ended. I had been so blind then. I had rushed to the Ritz, ready to defend my family name, to fight for the man who was supposed to love me. I had walked into a trap, a fully orchestrated public humiliation that ended with me being exposed as the fraud, the liar, and ultimately, dead in a car accident on the 405. I was back. And I was not going to make the same mistake that I dressed quickly, not in the expensive, polished outfit I had worn before, but in simple jeans and a black t-shirt. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired, a ghost of the woman I had been yesterday. But my eyes were sharp, a cold fire burning in them that had never been there before. The Ritz Carlton lobby was a cathedral of marble and chandeliers. I walked in, feeling the familiar, expensive hum of the place. And there they were. Ethan, broad-shouldered and handsome in his tailored suit, stood at the center of a small crowd. And next to him, clinging to his arm like a limpet, was Mia. She was a vision in a white silk dress, her blonde hair styled in soft waves, her face a mask of innocent distress. Amelia. Ethan's voice boomed, a mix of relief and irritation. Finally. I walked towards them, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the marble floor. I did not smile. I saw the group of investors, men in gray suits with expensive watches, their curiosity piqued. I saw Ethan's lawyer, Mr. Henderson, holding a folder. I saw my own reflection, pale and determined, in the polished brass of a NEARBY elevator door. There's been a misunderstanding, Mia said, her voice a practiced tremble. She had large, blue doe eyes that could make a man weep. Amelia, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to come to this. She clutched a piece of paper to her chest. Let's just get this over with, Ethan said, his jaw tight. He was looking at me with a kind of pity, a condescending pity I had mistaken for love just a day ago. Mr. Henderson has the original adoption records. My research team found them. They prove you weren't adopted by the Van Horn family, Amelia. You were taken in as a charity case. A murmur rippled through the investors. Their eyes were on me. A mixture of shock and disappointment. They had invested in Ethan's company, which was, in turn, invested in the Van Horn family legacy. A legacy I was apparently stealing. In my past life, this was where I had crumbled. I had cried. I had pleaded. I had looked to Ethan for support, and he had turned away. He had looked at Mia, the true heiress, and chosen her, leaving me shattered, penniless, and dead on a freeway at this time. I just stood there, letting the silence stretch. Then I walked past them all, not to a chair, but to the grand piano nestled in the corner of the lobby. A young man was playing a soft, unobtrusive jazz tune. He was a nice kid, probably rely making a living. I leaned down and whispered something in his ear. He looked up, riled but nodded. He stopped playing his soft jazz, and with a deep breath, began to play a piece I had written myself. A piece of music that was my soul on paper. A composition I had created after Ethan's last betrayal. He had never heard it. I had recorded it in secret, a song of pure, unadulterated grief, and it had become a worldwide hit posthumously. My only real legacy. That he played the opening bars, and the sorrowful, haunting melody filled the massive lobby, silencing the murmurs. People turned. Investors looked up from their phones. Ethan's face went pale. Amelia, what are you doing? This is not the time for a performance. I finally turned to face him. Ethan, I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the music. The last thing I wanted was to make a scene. But you forced my hand. I walked towards him, feeling the eyes of the entire lobby on me. It's not just the adoption that is a lie. The entire foundation of the Van Horn estate is built on a stolen identity. I stopped a few feet from him and looked directly at Mia. Tell me, Mia, how much did you pay the hacker to create a fake digital trail leading to these original adoption records? She stiffened. A flash of genuine fear in her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. Ethan, she's lying. She's just trying to deflect. The records you have there, I said, nodding Tawa RDS the folder in Mr. Henderson's hand. They are digital forgeries. The original paper documents were stored in a bank vault in Zurich that only my mother had access to. I have the key to that vault. But I also have the original paperwork, the ones that show I was adopted, and the subsequent legal contract that made me the sole heir. I turned to the investors. Mr. Henderson, you are a respected lawyer. You know that any digital evidence is only as strong as its chain of custody. You have a file from a private investigator, a man you hired because Ethan told you to. You don't have a single original document. The music swelled in the background. I could feel the energy in the room shifting. I'm not the fake heiress. I continued, my voice firm. My mother, the real Mrs. Van Horn, adopted me when I was a baby. She did it because she loved me. The contract she signed gave me full rights to the estate. Mia is the fraud. She's an actress Ethan hired to create a wedge between me and my family's legacy. He wanted to destabilize the BOA RD, to force a vote of no confidence against me, so he could take over the entire Van Horn conglomerate through a hostile takeover. A collective gasp went through the room. I walked over to a La RGE Marbly table, where a glass of water had been left for a guest. I reached into my pocket. It wasn't a key. It was my phone. I pulled up a picture on my phone. It was a scan of the original document, dated 25 years ago. The signature was a perfect match for my mother's. This, I said, showing the image to Mr. Henderson, is the actual adoption certificate. The one in your folder is a well-made forgery, and the contract is at the bank in Zurich. Mia stepped forward, her face a mask of righteous anger. This is insane. You're making a scene, Amelia. You're just a SCA-red little girl who stole a family name. I smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who had been to hell and back. I remembered the cold of the morgue, the sound of the machines beeping, the final stillness. I remembered reading about my own funeral in the newspaper, how Ethan had given a eulogy praising my great spirit, while Mia stood by his side, the grieving best friend. The irony was so bitter, it was almost sweet. Mia, I said softly, my voice dripping with a quiet menace that made her flinch. You just made a mistake. A big one. I stepped closer to her, and she instinctively backed away. You see, my mother didn't just adopt me. She wrote a letter. A letter she put into the safe deposit box with the original documents. A letter that says in her own handwriting that she never had a child by blood, that she knew about the fake heiress long before she died. Elite. I had to. There was no letter. There was no Zurich vault. But I had seen the look in her eyes when I mentioned the contract. There was a secret there, a vulnerability. I was her daughter in every way that mattered, I said, my voice rising. And you, Mia, are nothing but a cheap, paid actor. A pawn in a game you were too stupid to see you were losing. Ethan's face was a mask of fury. Enough. This is absurd. I am done with this circus. He turned to Mr. Henderson. We're leaving. This is over. She's unstable. But Mr. Henderson wasn't moving. He was ring at my phone. Where did you get that, Amelia the Watermay RK? That's a Zurich bank's official digital authentication. My heart hammered. I had scanned it from a photo my mother had shown me years ago. But I hadn't been sure it was real. I had only gambled. It's from the vault, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my head. My mother's vault. The one in Zurich. The same vault that holds the original contract I mentioned. Ethan stepped toward me, his face inches from mine, spittle flying. You're a lunatic. You've been a cancer in this family from day one. I was going to ryu Amelia. I was going to give you my name, and you repay me with this FARCE. He was so close. I could see the veins in his temples. He was losing control. He had been so confident in his plan, so certain I would crumble. He looked at me, his eyes wild. Mia is worth 10 of you. She's refined, cultured, and she doesn't have to lie about who she is. I pick her, Amelia. I pick her, and I will destroy everything you've ever built. The words hung in the air. I pick her. There it was. The echo of my death sentence from the past life. That I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw him for what he was. A small, pathetic man who would do anything for money and power. I saw the loser he would become. The man who would be caught in a scandal a year from now. The man who would lose everything he had ever touched because of his own greed and arrogance. All right, Ethan, I said, my voice as cold as the grave I had crawled out of. You pick her. I turned and walked away. I walked past the investors, past Mr. Henderson, past the frozen figure of Mia. I walked toward the double doors that led to the street. The piano music followed me, playing the final chorus of my song, a lament for the woman I had been and a triumphant anthem for the one I was becoming. That I was halfway to the door when I heard Ethan's voice behind me, laced with pure, undisguised panic. I'll have you arrested for fraud, Amelia. I'll drag the Van Horn name through the mud so deep they'll never recover. I paused, my hand on the polished brass door handle, and looked back over my shoulder. Do it, I said, a smile finally reaching my eyes. Please, do it. Let's see who loses their CA rear over a fake adoption certificate. I stepped out of the Ritz Carlton, the door swinging shut behind me. The late afternoon sun had broken through the clouds, warming my face. I took a deep breath, the air tasting like freedom and vengeance. The next morning, I was sitting in a small, sun-drenched bistro in Santa Monica, picking at a pain chocolate I had no appetite for, when the world changed. My phone buzzed. A notification from a financial news app one had forgotten I had. The headline was STARK. Empire in shambles. Van Horn heiress ousted in Boa Road coup. My stomach lurched. I clicked on it. The article was brief, mentioning a secret vote, and a vote of no confidence that had been passed the night before, right after my public outburst. It painted me as a hysterical, unstable woman, a problem that had finally been solved. It was damning. It was also a lie. My father's company, my mother's life's work. They had just taken it. They had forced a vote with forged documents, and the Boa RD, spineless as ever, had folded. I felt the old panic rising, the familiar tightness in my chest. In my last life, this was the moment I had spiraled. I had driven to the office, screaming, crying, making a scene that only confirmed their narrative. I had been a hot mess, and they had loved it. At this time, I put the phone down, took a slow sip of my cold coffee, and felt a strange, icy calm settle over me. They had played their hand. They had shown me their weakness. They had relied on the Boa RD's cowardice and their ability to bury the truth under a mountain of expensive PR. But they had forgotten one thing. I had nothing left to lose. I had the phone number of a financial journalist named David. He was a Shah RK in a cheap suit who had been sniffing around the Van Horn family for months, looking for a scandal. In my last life, I had refused to speak to him, too proud, too SCA red. This time, I dialed his number. David Chun, I said when he answered. It's Amelia. I want to tell you everything. And I have proof. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a rented office in Westwood, STA ring at the news. Every screen was showing the same story. An expose by David Chun had just dropped, and it was a bomb. The article, titled The Van Horn Hoax, a story of greed, betrayal, and forged documents, was beautiful in its meticulous, damning detail. He had done the work. He had tracked down the hacker Mia had hired, a kid from a community college in Burbank who, for a few grand, had helped build the entire digital forgery. He had traced the financial trail of the payments to a shadow company owned by a shell corporation in the Caymans. He had even found a disgruntled former employee of Ethan's company who had testified to the scheme. My mother's reputation was spotless. I was the wronged, heroic heiress, valiantly fighting to save her legacy. The fallout was instantaneous. Ethan's company stock plummeted. The Boa RD, who had been so quick to side with him, was scrambling to distance themselves, screaming about how they had been deceived. Mia was in hiding. Her picture had been plastered everywhere. The face of a grifter. I leaned back in my chair, a quiet smile on my face. It was a START. The chess game had just begun. A week later, the BOA RD requested a meeting. I arrived at the Van Horn Headquarters, a sleek, glass and steel tower in downtown LA, feeling like a general walking into enemy territory. The BOA Ridrum was full of them. The old, white-haired men in expensive suits who had always treated me like a child. They were all shuffling papers and murmuring apologies. "Amelia," said Mr. Sterling, the chairman, a man who looked like a turtle with a comb-over. We were all mistaken. Ethan and his group manipulated us. We acted in haste. We want to fix this. We want you back. The BOA RD is prepared to offer you your position." I smiled. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Sterling, but I no longer want a position." I walked to the head of the table. "I'm here to tell you that I'll be taking over the company, not as a CEO they can control, but as the owner. The BOA RD is dissolved." A silence fell over the room. It was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Sterling's face went pale. "Amelia, that's quite an overstep. You can't just dissolve the BOA Road. This isn't some small business. This is a billion-dollar operation. There are procedures, regulations." "The procedures," I said, pulling out a thick folder from my briefcase. All in here." I dropped it on the table. "This is a cease and desist order from my lawyers, stating that the BOA RD's vote was illegal due to the fraudulent documents that were presented. It also includes a list of civil suits I will be filing against each of you for negligence and dereliction of duty, for allowing a hostile takeover to occur based on clear RLY forged evidence." They read at the folder as if it were a live snake. "The BOA RD is dissolved," I repeated. "As of this moment, I am the sole shareholder in control of the Van Horn estate. You can all collect your things and leave." One of the men, a red-faced stockbroker type, slammed his hand on the table. "This is ridiculous. You can't just fire us. This is corporate suicide. We need a stable, experienced hand to guide this company, not a traumatized young woman with a vendetta." I met his raillery with a cold smile. "My hand is the only one that will guide this company now. And I don't have a vendetta, Mr. Betrayal. I have a BOA Road. A new one." I opened the door. They're waiting in the foyer. A dozen people, some of whom had been my mother's most loyal and trusted advisors, people who had been frozen out by Ethan's cronies, filed in, all of them looking determined. I had spent the last week quietly gathering my allies, the ghosts of my mother's company, the people who still believed in her vision. I had given them a future. Sterling's face was a mask of fury. He knew he was beaten. "You're making a huge mistake, Amelia. We'll fight this. We'll take you to court. The BOA RD will be reinstated." "Good luck with that," I said. "You're welcome to try." As they began to pack up their belongings, one of them, a younger man named Mark, one of Ethan's cronies, sneered at me as he passed. "You think you've won, do you? You're just a girl playing in a man's world. We'll be back. And when we we'll take everything you have." His words, meant to wound, just made me laugh. "I already have everything I have," I said, my voice low. "And it's more than you could ever imagine. Now get out." 2 months had passed since I had taken over. It was late October, the air crisp with the promise of winter. I was walking in a park in Brentwood, my hands in the pockets of my coat. The company was stable. The new BOA RD was functional. My life was a quiet, controlled hum of activity. It was satisfying. It was also empty. The fire of vengeance that had once burned so brightly was now just a low, steady ember. I missed the adrenaline, the constant battle. I missed feeling alive. Then I saw him. Ethan. He was in the middle of the path, alone. His suit was wrinkled, his hair a mess, and he had the look of a man who had been falling for a very long time. His company was dead. His reputation was ruined. He had been publicly humiliated on a national scale. He saw me. His eyes widened, a flicker of rage, of something else, crossing his face. Then before my eyes he crumbled. He dropped to his knees in the middle of the dusty walking path. It was pathetic. "Amelia," he pleaded, his voice raw. "I'm sorry. I was a fool. I made a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. I saw you that day in the lobby, saw how strong you were, and I knew I'd lost you. I'm nothing without you. My company, my future, my entire life. It's all gone. I'm begging you. Please. I will do anything. I'll crawl through broken glass. I'll prostrate myself before you. I'll kiss your shoes. Anything. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll just give me another chance. I need you. I stopped walking. I looked down at the pathetic figure groveling at my feet, a small bitter smile touching my lips. He looked up at me, his eyes gleaming with a desperation so pure it was almost a Artemelia. Please. I will be your slave. I will crawl on my hands and knees. Look, I'll do it. And he did. He lowered his head until his forehead touched the ground, a full prostration right there in the middle of the parquet. People were ring, some laughing, others looking away in embarrassment. He didn't see a. Please, he whispered into the dirt. You are my world. My world. I remembered the day I died. I remembered screaming his name in my car. The radio playing a song he had once said was his favorite. I remembered the look on his face as he had turned away from me in the Ritz lobby, the smile on his lips as he had walked away with Mia, hand in hand. And I thought about my mother. She had been my rock, my shield. The last thing she had said to me was to be strong, to never let anyone make me feel small. And I hadn't. I had just let them kill me. But I had been given a second chance. A chance to be the person she had always known I could be. I stepped back, my heels clicking on the hard-packed yarth. Ethan, I said, my voice soft but cold as a glacier. Get up. He looked up, hope blooming in his eyes. Yes. Of course, my love. Anything for you. No, I said, shaking my head. I don't want you. I never did. Not the real you. You're a broken, empty shell of a man. You don't deserve my forgiveness. You don't deserve my TRS. You don't even deserve my anger. His face crumbled again. Amelia. I'll do anything. I swear I'll be good. You already lost your chance at redemption, I said. You had a year of my life. You had a lifetime of my trust. And you threw it all away for a fake heiress and a few $1 million. Don't you ever come near me again. I turned and walked away from the groveling wreckage of my former life. The success of the exposé didn't just resurrect my reputation. It turned me into a media darling. Suddenly, the woman who had been the villain of the Ritz-Carlton lobby was the hero of the hour. I was the face of resilience, the poster child for fighting back. I did a few interviews, smiled for the cameras, and serifully curated the image of the gentle, wronged heiress who had simply weathered a storm. But it was all an act. I was bored that my life, which had once been a chaotic whirlwind of grief and vengeance, had settled into a monotonous, cushioned routine. Boa Road meetings. Jazzy Galat. Silent dinners in my penthouse. I had my revenge. I had my power. But the smile I wore was as hollow as the one I had worn when I was alive. Then I met Noah. He was a freelance photographer, lanky, with calloused hands and a crooked smile that made him look like a pirate. He didn't know who I was. Or at least he pretended not to. I saw him first at a small gallery opening in Silver Lake, a place I would never have been caught dead in before my death. I was there because my friend Lara had dragged me, insisting I needed to see real art, and stop looking at paintings of my mother's horses. He was photographing the art, not the people. I watched him for a while, fascinated by the way he moved, his intense focus on a single piece of canvas, the way he framed the shot, the way his hand adjusted the lens. He was in his own world, a world of light and shadow, a world away from the relentless glare of my own. He turned, and our eyes met. He didn't flinch. He didn't look away. A slow, easy smile spread across his face. You look like you need a drink, he said. And not the champagne kind. And just like that, I was hooked up for 6 blissful months. I escaped my life. He didn't see about the Van Horn name. He just read about me. He took me to his tiny, cluttered apartment in Echo Park, where the walls were covered in prints and the air smelled like coffee and film developer. We talked about music and books and the beauty of a sunset over the Hollywood sign. He showed me the real Ella, in the parts of the city I had always been too red to explore. The taco stands in Boyle Heights, the hidden jazz clubs in Limerick Park, the graffiti walls in downtown. He made me feel like a normal girl, not an heiress or a ghost. He teased me about my superior attitude, and challenged me on my opinions. He didn't treat me like I was fragile, like everyone else did. He treated me like I was strong. That one night, we were lying on a blanket in Griffith Park, looking up at the stars. The city hummed below us, a vast electric tapestry. I don't know how you do it, he said, his voice quiet. Do what? Live with all of it. The BOA RD meetings. The lawyers. The people who probably still hate you for something you didn't do. I was silent for a moment, searching for the right words. I learned to stop seeing what people think. That's a lie, he said, turning his head to look at me. You see, you just don't show it. You've built a fortress around yourself. A fortress of power and money. But you're not happy, Amelia. You're just safe. His words cut through me, sharp and true. He saw me. The real me. The me behind the empire. The me who was still haunted by the memory of my own death, by the coldness of the morgue, by the emptiness of my penthouse. I'm happy, I said. But the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. He leaned over and pressed a soft kiss to my forehead. You're not. And that's okay. You don't have to be happy all the time. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to let yourself feel something. I wanted to tell him everything. About the crash. About the cold. About the look on my mother's face. But I couldn't. The words were lodged in my throat, trapped behind a wall of fear and pride. Then my phone buzzed, shattering the illusion. It was my lawyer. Amelia, he said, his voice urgent. I'm sorry to bother you, but you need to see this. Someone has been accessing your mother's old medical records. They're trying to claim that her estate is invalid because her mental state was impaired at the time of her death, making her previous directives, including your power of attorney, null and void. I sat up, the warmth of the night draining away. Who? It's Markba, he said. The same BOA RD member you fired. He's claiming your mother's estate is in question, and he's going to have the entire inheritance frozen in a court order. My world tilted. The foundation of my new life, my fully constructed fortress, was crumbling. They were trying to take everything. My mother's legacy, my identity, my power. They were back. Noah was watching me, his eyes filled with concern. What is it, Amelia? I have to go, I said, my voice clipped. I stood up, brushing the grass off my jeans. I'm sorry. There's something I have to deal with. Of course, he said, standing up. He didn't ask for an explanation. He just gave me a small, sad smile. Call me when you can. I nodded, walking away from him, my heart heavy with a familiar dread. The fortress I had built was under siege. And I was standing on the rampa RTS, alone. The battle was much more vicious than I had anticipated. The old BOA RD members, led by Markba and the disgraced Mr. Sterling, had banded together with a new financial backer. A rival investment firm run by a man named Arthur Vance, who had always hated my mother's company. They claimed my mother had been suffering from dementia in her final years, rendering her will and all her subsequent decisions invalid. My lawyers were fighting back, but the damage was being done. The press, who had once celebrated me, were now back to vilifying me, portraying me as a greedy usurper who had stolen a fortune from a confused old woman. Our campaign was in full swing, and I was on the wrong side of it. I was spending every waking moment in meetings, talking to lawyers, poring over legal documents. I was losing weight, not sleeping, my eyes constantly burning. I stopped returning Noah's calls, burying myself in the fight. Then I found a strange email in my inbox. It was from a woman named Sarah, an old assistant to my mother. She had been fired by the BOA RD years ago, a victim of one of Ethan's purges. The email was blunt and direct. Amelia, I know you're busy fighting a ghost, but I have information that could end this. Your mother loved you more than anything. She didn't have dementia, but she was terrified of you inheriting everything. She found out someone was plotting against you, and she was trying to protect you. She put a clause in her will that makes the inheritance void if the company is ever sold to an outside party. It was her final Safagoi road. The claim of mental impairment is a lie to get around that clause. I can testify to that. I sat back in my chair, my heart hammering. It was a clue. A weapon. My mother had been a genius. She had seen the future. She had seen the wolves circling that I tracked down S.A. Ra in a small town in Oregon. She was an older woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. I knew your mother for 40 years, she said, pouring me a cup of tea in her cozy kitchen. She was shot RP as attack until the day she died. The idea that she had dementia is an insult to her memory. How did you find this out? I asked. Because I was the one who helped her draft the clause, S.A. Ra said. It wasn't in the official will, but in a separate, legally binding letter of intent. It was her insurance policy. She knew that if you ever married Ethan, he'd find a way to take it from you. She was trying to protect you from him. I felt the cold anger I had been suppressing finally ignite. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about my mother's memory. The people who were trying to destroy me were also trying to destroy her legacy. Thank you, I said, taking her hand. You have no idea what this means to me. Just promise me one thing, S.A. Ra said, squeezing my hand. Promise me you'll fight them. Not for the money. For her. I will, I said, my voice thick with emotion that I flew back to L.A. Remed with the information, and went to my lawyers. We had a new strategy, a new legal argument to present in court. But I knew the battle would be long and exhausting. And I knew deep down that winning the legal war wouldn't be enough to fill the void in my soul. That night, I drove to Noah's apartment. I stood outside his door, my hand raised to knock, but I hesitated. What could I possibly say to him? I had abandoned him. I had pushed him away. I had chosen to fight my ghosts instead of letting him in. I didn't knock. I just turned and walked away, leaving his small, apartment behind. Feeling more alone than I ever had. That the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The legal war with the old board members was a bloody, exhausting affair. S.A. Ra's testimony was a crucial blow, but Markba Rowe and Arthur Vance had bottomless pockets and a team of ruthless lawyers. They fought every inch of the way, throwing up appeals and counterclaims. But I had the truth on my side. I had my mother's memory. The final settlement came in the spring. I won. The clause S.A. Ra had discovered was ironclad. My mother's estate was protected, and the board members who had tried to undermine it were forced to pay a massive settlement for legal fees and defamation. It was a victory, but it felt hollow. I had spent months in a courtroom, months in my fortress, and months away from Noah. I called him one night, my fingers trembling as I dialed his number. It went to voicemail. Noah, it's me, I said, my voice cracking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I pushed you away. I know I was a coway road. I was SCA red. I was SCA red of losing myself, of losing my mother, of losing everything. But I realized I already lost the most important thing. I lost you. If you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I'm at the old observatory in Griffith, Park. I'll wait for you. All night. I hung up and drove to the observatory. It was closed, but I found a spot on a bench, overlooking the city. The lights of LA glittered below me like a broken constellation. That I waited for hours. The wind picked up, raying the scent of jasmine and exhaust fumes. The STARS wheeled overhead. And I waited. I thought about my life. The girl I had been, the woman I had become, the ghost I had been. I had been so focused on revenge, on power, on security, that I had forgotten the point of it all. To live. To feel. To connect. I was about to give up and go home. My heart heavy with a familiar loneliness, when I heard footsteps behind me. Amelia. I turned. Noah was standing there, his hair windswept, his face etched with worry. He looked tired, but he was here. Noah. I breathed. I stood up. I'm sorry. I'm a mess. I don't deserve you. Shut up, he said, pulling me into a tight embrace. His arms were strong, his heart beating against mine. You're a mess. But you're my mess. I sobbed into his chest, all the walls I had built finally crumbling. I was so SCA red. I whispered. I was so SCA red of losing everything. I lost you. I lost me. I know, he said, stroking my hair. I know. But you're here now. That's all that matters. He pulled back, holding my face in his hands. I don't see a re about your money. I don't see a re about your Boa Road. I don't see a re about your stupid empire. I see a re about you. The real you. The one who fights for what's right. The one who built an empire from nothing. The one who feels too much and hides it all. That's the person I love, Amelia. I read at him, the word love echoing in the vast, quiet space of the night. It was a word I hadn't heard in a long time, not directed at me. Not like this. Not with such simple, uncomplicated sincerity. I love you too, I said, the words tumbling out of me, raw and true. I love you. He smiled, that crooked pirate smile I had missed so much. I know. I was just waiting for you to figure it out. I laughed, a real laugh, a sound that surprised me. Then he kissed me, a soft, sweet kiss that tasted like hope and forgiveness. The city lights twinkled below us, and for the first time in Heiress, I felt truly alive. I had survived my death, and in doing so, I had found my life. A few months later, I stood in the sun-drenched living room of my penthouse, my hands on my hips. The Boa RD was there, the new loyal Boa Road Noah was there, leaning against a wall, a cup of coffee in his hand. He was wearing a simple suit, looking slightly uncomfortable, but he was smiling. I had just announced a major decision. I was dissolving the Boa Road. Not out of malice, but out of a desire for a different kind of life. Amelia, said the new chairman, a woman named Janet, who was a brilliant strategist and a good friend. You can't just dissolve us. We have a responsibility to the Shari holders. And I have a responsibility to myself, I said. I don't want to spend the rest of my life in boardrooms. I want to live. I want to travel. I want to paint. I want to wake up next to the man I love without 1,000 emails demanding my attention. Janet sighed. What about the company? What about the legacy? The legacy is already secured, I said. I've set up a trust that will be managed by a team of professionals. The company will continue to thrive. But I won't be the one steering the ship. I'm done. I looked around the room at the faces of the people who had believed in me, who had helped me claw my way back from the dead. They looked uncertain, but they also looked relieved. They had been working for a ghost, a woman driven by vengeance. Now they were looking at a woman who was finally at peace. All right, Janet said, a small smile finally breaking through. If that's what you want, we'll make it work. After the Boa RD members filed out, Noah walked over to me. He put his arms around my waist and rested his chin on my shoulder. So, he said, his breath warm against my ear. You're really going to do it. You're going to become a normal person. I'm going to try, I said, leaning into him. Isn't it? Terrifying, he agreed. But I'm in. We stood there for a long moment, just holding each other. Then I pulled back and looked at him. I want to show you something. I said that I led him to my study, a room I had rely used since I had taken over the penthouse. It was filled with boxes, old photographs, and mementos from my mother's life. I had been meaning to go through them for months, but I had never found the time. Now, it felt right that I opened a box and pulled out an old leather-bound journal. It was my mother's. I had found it in her safe deposit box, the one in Zurich that had never actually existed. It was the real one, the one she had kept hidden from everyone. I opened it to a page marked with a faded ribbon. The handwriting was elegant, precise, just like her. My dear rest Amelia. The entry began. If you are rereading this, then I am gone. I have left you this letter to tell you the truth. I was never your birth mother. I found you when you were just a baby, abandoned in a hospital in Chicago. I took you home because I loved you from the moment I saw you. And I have loved you every single day since. I knew there would be people who would try to use your past against you. People who would try to tear you down because they were jealous of what we had. But I want you to know that none of that matters. You are my daughter. My true daughter. And I will always be proud of you. I felt tears streaming down my face. I had known the truth, of course, but reading it in her own words was different. It was like hearing her voice again. Noah was standing behind me, his hand on my shoulder. He didn't say anything. He just let me cry. I closed the journal and turned to him. I spent so long being angry, I said. So long being red. I forgot what it was like to just be. I know, he said. But you're not that person anymore. You're someone new. He was right. I was not the same woman who had woken up in that shabby apartment on Melrose. I was not the same woman who had died on the 405. I was someone who had survived, who had fought, who had won. And now I was finally ready to live. We spent the rest of the afternoon going through my mother's things. We found old photographs, letters from her friends, and a collection of vintage jewelry I had never seen before. I laughed at the pictures of her in the 70s, with her big hair and bell-bottom jeans. I cried when I found a letter she had written to my father, the man who had left her before I was born. It was a letter full of longing and loss, a letter she had never sent. "Did you ever know him?" Noah asked softly, and I shook my head. "He died before I was old enough to remember him. My mother never talked about him. I always assumed she hated him." "Maybe she did," Noah said. "Or maybe she just loved him too much to talk about it." I looked at the letter again, at the faded ink, at the TRS that had stained the page. I would never know the truth. But for the first time, I was okay with that. That evening, we went out to dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Silver Lake, the kind of place where the owner knew your name, and the wine was cheap but good. Noah ordered for us, and I let him. I let myself enjoy the moment, the simple pleasure of being with someone who saw me and loved me anyway. "So," he said, twirling pasta around his fork, "what's next for the retired heiress?" I thought about it. For so long, my future had been about revenge, about power. Now it was a blank canvas. "I want to travel," I said. "I want to see the world. I want to take pictures with you, and eat terrible food in strange places, and get lost in cities I've never heard of." "Sounds like a plan," he said, his eyes shining. "And I want to write," I said. "I've been thinking about it for a while. I want to write a book. About my mother. About everything that happened. Not for anyone else, but for me." "You should do it," he said. "You have a story to tell. A good one." We finished dinner and walked back to his car hand in hand. The night was warm, and the streets were quiet. It felt like the whole city was holding its breath, waiting for the next chapter to begin. As we drove back to my penthouse, I watched the lights of Los Angeles blur past. I thought about the woman I had been. The one who had died screaming in a car on a freeway. I thought about the woman I had become. The one who had fought tooth and nail to reclaim her life. And I thought about the woman I was still becoming. The one who was finally learning to let go. When we got home, I stood on the balcony looking out at the city. Noah came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "Are you okay?" he asked. I turned to face him, my hands resting on his chest. "I'm more than okay," I said. "I'm free." He smiled and I kissed him. The city hummed below us, a symphony of light and sound. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid of what the future held. I was just grateful to be alive to see it. The next morning I woke up early. The sun was just beginning to rise over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I looked over at Noah, still asleep, his face peaceful and unguay-eyed. I smiled a quiet, content smile. I got up, put on my robe, and walked to my study. I pulled out a fresh notebook and a pen. I opened it to the first page and wrote, Chapter 1. The words looked right. They felt right. I took a deep breath, and I began to write. Not about the girl who had died, but about the woman who had lived.